Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Yoma Daf Pevav is a lengthy. I got it daf all on the topic of tshuva. The Gemara will discuss various levels of Avera and what one needs to do to gain kapara to remove each one. The Gemara will discuss how severely one needs to do tshuva for each one, how much each level of tshuva removes the Avera itself. The Gemara will also speak about Chil Hashem and what it is, define it. The Gemara will have a number of other statements on the topic of tshuva that it learns from various psukim. So first of all, as an introduction to the daf, we need to know the levels of Avera. So there are a number of levels of Avera, in order from least severe to most severe. A mitzvah's aseh, a positive commandment to do something, is generally considered to be the least severe. More severe than that is a los aseh. A los aseh that carries malchus, where if you don't do a certain Avera, where the Torah tells us not to do something, and if you do it, it's punishable by lashes. Now, between those two, there's a middle category, and that's a los aseh, which is not a real los aseh. It's what we call not a los aseh gomer. That means that it's a los aseh that does not carry malchus. That's between an aseh and a regular los aseh. The Gemara uses as an example of that a lav hanitek laseh, that the Torah says not to do something, but if you do it, you do violate the Isser, here's a mitzvah aseh to fix it. Now, worse even than a regular aseh that carries malchus is a los aseh that carries misa by the courts, misa b'tei shomayim, and krisos kares is the most severe of them all. And the Gemara will discuss something that has Chil Hashem in it, that is the most severe above everything else. Now, our Mishnah had begun, we had seen in our Mishnah that tshuva itself, without anything else, takes off light averas, kalas, and it had defined those as being an aseh and a los aseh. So the Gemara right away asks, if it takes off a los aseh, it only takes off an aseh, that's lighter, just say los aseh, you don't have to say aseh. So Rabbi Yehuda the Amora explains, and he says it does not take off a los aseh. Los aseh requires tshuva and Yom Kippur to remove. When our Mishnah said an aseh and a los aseh, it meant the two lower levels which are equal, and that is a mitzvah aseh and a mitzvah los aseh hanitek laseh. That is a los aseh that is not so severe because it comes with an aseh and it does not carry malchus. Somewhere has a couple of kashas on this idea, on this claim that a regular standard los aseh that carries malchus does not work for tshuva. Tshuva does not work to remove that avera. It also requires Yom Kippur. Now, the first kasha is from a brisa, which is following up on our Mishnah. Our Mishnah had said that tshuva takes off light averos, so the brisa says, what's a light avera? An aseh and a los aseh. The only exception is lo sisa. Now, not lo saseh, lo sisa. Lo sisa is the mitzvah, lo sisa, Hashem alakecha lashav, ki lo yanaka Hashem. Hashem will not clean off somebody who takes his name in vain, who swears falsely. So Gemara says, so you see that that's a special thing, but a standard los aseh apparently is removed by tshuva. So Gemara says, no. Lo sisa is not considered stricter than any other los aseh. There's nothing special about it, even though it says lo yanaka, there's nothing special about it. Lo sisa is a standard los aseh, and when it says lo sisa, it means lo sisa and anything on that level, which is all types of los aseh. That's what it means when it says not lo sisa. So it's saying, the Bryce is also saying an aseh and a los aseh, anitek laseh, an aseh and a lav anitek laseh, those tshuva removes, but lo sisa and anything on that level, which means any lav anitek laseh, tshuva does not remove for that. Okay, now the Gemara has another proof, and this is from a continuation of that very brisa. The brisa says as follows: Lo sisa is a borderline. Anything considered to be lighter than lo sisa is removed by tshuva. Lo sisa and above lo sisa, anything stricter, tshuva does not work. So you see from here that lo sisa, which is stricter than a regular lav, lo sisa is the only thing that lo sisa and above, tshuva does not work. That implies that a regular los aseh, tshuva works. Someone says no, lo sisa and anything like it. All los asehs are the same level as lo sisa. Again, there's nothing special about lo sisa over any other lav. Lo sisa and all other lavin, those are all included in what tshuva does not work for. That's when we said lo sisa on up. So lo sisa and any other lav that has malchus, all those and worse, tshuva does not work for. The Gemara now brings its final proof, which it accepts, and that's a brisa that says the Torah tells us some things tshuva works for and some things tshuva alone does not work for. We see that from, it says vinake and lo yanake. Some things will be cleansed, some things you won't be cleansed. Now, what will you not be cleansed for? So it says lo sisa it says on it lo yanake. But the Brisa says it's limited to only lo sisa. Lo sisa is the only regular lav that we say lo yanake, because it says lo yanake esashayu says shema lashav. Only this do we say tshuva doesn't work, but all other lavin tshuva alone works for. So that goes directly against what Rav Yehuda said, that regular lavin tshuva does not work for. So the Gemara says you're right, but I will show you that it is a machlokes tanaim, and there is a Brisa that says that tshuva does not work for a standard lo saseh. What is that Brisa? So the Brisa says, what does tshuva work for, and what does tshuva not work for? So the Brisa spells out. The Torah says, "V'nake lo yanake." Something tshuva works for, something tshuva does not work for. So as follows: a mitzvah aseh and a lavenitik laseh, tshuva works for. A lo saseh that carries kares, tshuva makes it hang, meaning there is no punishment meted out. And when Yom Kippur comes along, Yom Kippur is mechaper. Krisis and misas based in are included in that as well. They also need tshuva plus Yom Kippur. So there you see a clear establishment based on Venake. Lo Yanaka, that this Brisa clearly holds that tshuva does not work for a regular lo saseh. Now the Gemara brings another Brisa here that says, what does tshuva work for, what does tshuva not work for? It says Venake lo Yanake, tshuva works for what will you be cleansed for? What will you not be cleansed for? The Brisa says you'll be cleansed for things which you do tshuva for. You will not be cleansed for things which you not do. You do not do tshuva for. Now the Gemara brings the famous 4 chilukei kapara, 4 levels of kapara. The Gemara says that Rav Masya ben Charash asked Rav Elazar ben Azariah, in Rome, did you hear that there are 4 levels of kapara? I heard that there are only 3 levels. So the Gemara explains that there are 4 levels besides for tshuva. That means that if you count tshuva there as one level, something that gets kapara with tshuva itself, there are 3 other levels besides that. There are 3 things that there are 3 additional requirements besides for tshuva on 3 additional levels that tshuva does not work for. So what are the 4 levels? One of them tshuva itself works for. That's a mitzvah aseh. Somebody violates an aseh, the Torah says he does not move from there until he gets mechila right away, as soon as he does tshuva. As the Torah says, "Tshuva b'adam shavim, erpam tshuva asechem," I will forgive you right away on the spot. However, if he did a lo saseh, so then tshuva doesn't work. Tshuva just makes it frozen until Yom Kippur is mechaper. Like the Torah says, "Ki b'yom hazeh chaper lechem." There are certain things that only Yom Kippur will atone for. So from there we see there has to be something that Yom Kippur works for that tshuva itself does not work for. Now, the next level above that is chayve krisos misas based in. Those things Yom Kippur and tshuva only freeze, and yisurin, trouble, suffering that takes off those averos, like the Torah says, ufekadati b'shevet pisham uvenigaim avonam. I will remember and I will remove their sins with trouble. Now, if there's chil Hashem involved, then all those 3 things, tshuva, Yom Kippur, and yisurin, they freeze it so that there's no punishment, but it's not actually forgiven and removed until the day of the death of the person, like the Torah says, "V'nigla ba'oznei Hashem tzivakos im yichupar avan ezeh lochem ad temusun." Until you die, there is no kapar for that. Now the Gemara discusses what exactly is chil Hashem. When is there a disgrace to Hashem's name? So the Gemara brings a number of statements of Amoraim who describe what chil Hashem might be. So the Gemara says as follows. The first example is brought by Rav. Rav says that somebody like me, if I would take meat from a butcher and I do not pay him immediately, there's a short time in which he suspects me of stealing, that's a chil Hashem, even for those that short time. Says Abaye, it's only a place where the shopkeeper expects you to come to pay him, but in a place where where you are expected to wait until he comes to you, so if he didn't come to you, there's no problem. Of course, once he comes to you, then you do have to pay. Now, Ravina said, in the place that I live, as Machasya, that is where the shopkeepers, they come and they collect from you. So you are expected to wait for them to come to you. Now, Abai himself would try to avoid chil Hashem. The Gemara says when he bought meat from a mitzvah that's owned by partners, he would give half the money to one partner, and then the other partner, he would give the other half. Then he would bring them together, and they would calculate it and discuss how much meat he owed. That way, nobody suspected or thought that he did not get paid because they each got money for what they gave him specifically. Rav Yochanan said, famously, somebody like me on my level who walks 4 amos without learning Torah or wearing tefillin, Rashi says, during a time when he was not supposed to, because he needed a break, then that is a Chil Hashem right there. Now, the Gemara gives a definition of Chil Hashem for standard people. The Gemara says that Rav Yitzchak of the Yeshiva of Rav Yanai, he said that anybody who your reputation has been soiled or sullied to the extent that your friends are embarrassed of your reputation, that means you've done a Chil Hashem. What's an example of that? Nachum Yitzchak said, if people say, oh, may Hashem forgive this guy for what he did, that's a good example of a Chil Hashem. The Gemara brings a brisa to support that. Abaye says, the Torah says, V'haftas Hashem lekecha. What does that mean? That you should love Hashem? That means that the name of Shemayim should become beloved through you, that you should act in such a way that makes other people love Shemayim. That means that you should learn Torah, you should learn Mishnayos, you should learn Gemara, and if you're going to do all those things, you definitely make sure that your business should be conducted pleasantly with other people, and that people should say about you, fortunate is his father who taught him Torah, his Rebbe who taught him Torah, and Nebuch on those people who do not learn Torah, because look at this person who learned, see how good are his ways, see how well he behaves, see how refined his actions are. And about him, the Torah says, Vayomer li avdi ata Yisrael shebecha es ba'ar. Hashem said to me, you're my servant Yisrael, and I'm glorified through you and your actions. Now the Brisa defines the opposite, and that is where we get an example of Chil Hashem. Somebody who learns Mishnah, who learns Psukim, and learns Mishnayos, and learns Gemara, but his business dealings are not honest, and he does not speak pleasantly, and people say about him, oy, for that person who learned Torah, oy, his father who taught him Torah, woe on his Rebbe who taught him Torah, this person who learned, look how ugly his ways are, look how disgusting his actions are. About him the Torah says, Be'emar lahem am Hashem elu me'artza yitzo. Then you see, look at these people, see, they got thrown out of their land. This is a Chil Hashem for two reasons. Rashi adds one. First of all, because people see that your Torah learning apparently does not do you any good. And second of all, you'll be punished, and people will think that you were a tzaddik, at least to some extent, and yet you're suffering. It will seem like Hashem cannot save you from the suffering that you have without them realizing that it is well deserved. Now the Gemara discusses a number of statements about how great tshuva is. So Rechava Bar Chanina says tshuva is great because it brings healing to the world. Like it says, Erpo mishuvasam ayavim nedava. I'll heal your backwardsness and I will love them freely. It says, Erpa, I will give healing. Now this is following right after Shuva Yisrael, so it's referring to tshuva. Many of these psukim follow in that entire description of tshuva in the Haftarah for Shabbos Shuva Yisrael in Sefer Yeshaya. And Rechava Bar Chanina says that there's a contradiction. The Torah says Shuvu Bonam Shayvavim, which that seems to indicate that once you do tshuva, then I'll say that, oh, you were Shavavim before, you made mistakes, the averos you did were not a big deal. I'll view it as if you're a little bit wild, you're not so responsible for that. On the other hand, then it says Erpa Meshuvay Sechem, I will heal you. That implies in the future, that means that you're still not considered healed, even though you do tshuva, and it's a process you have to go through slowly. So there's not a contradiction. What if you do tshuva from ahava, out of love for Hashem, and you realize, how could I have done this avera, and that inspires you and drives you to do tshuva, then it's viewed as if the avera was never really something you did altogether, it was just a mistake. If, however, you do it because of fear of punishment of some sort, then that's not complete, and then it's a much slower process, and the Torah says, I'm going to heal you from it eventually. Now there's another contradiction. The Torah says, Shuva Bonam Shavim Erpa Meshuva Seichem, like the same pasuk we just brought, return while the children, I will heal your straying. And in a different pasuk it says, Ki anaychi ba'alti bachem, I am your master to you. And I'll take you one from a city and two from a family. So in the first pasuk it calls us banim, children, and the second pasuk it calls us slaves. So this is also not a difference. One is talking about ahava, one is talking about yira. When we turn to Hashem from ahava, then we are considered to be sons, and when we turn to Him from fear, we are considered to be like slaves that have a somewhat more strained relationship with the master than a father to a son. Now, more about tshuva. Rabbi Levi says tshuva is great that it reaches all the way to Kisei HaKavod, like it says, Shuva Yisrael Ad Hashem Alekecha, return Yisrael all the way to Hashem, all the way to the Kisei HaKavod, the throne of glory itself. Says Rabbi Yechanan, great is tshuva, that it even pushes away an Isser in the Torah, a negative commandment, like the Torah says, you're not allowed to remarry a wife that was divorced and married to somebody else. Like it says, could it be that somebody will divorce his wife and she'll go marry somebody else? Can she come back to him, that would bring guilt on the land. And you have committed adultery, Hashem says to Klal Yisrael, with many, many men. But you still come back to me and I will take you back. So Hashem is taking us back even though we've been with other spouses, and that is in a agadic sense violating an Isser in the Torah of somebody taking back a wife who's been to somebody else. So just Rav Yaina's son, more tshuva is great that it brings the geula, it brings the redemption closer, like it says, Volotzi in Goyel, Osheva Pesha B'Yakov, that the Redeemer comes to Tzion because of Shave Pesha B'Yakov, those who do tshuva. It says Rish Lakish tshuva is great because averos that were done on purpose become like averos that were done by accident. It's donos nasu shigigos, like the Torah says, Shuva Yisrael ad Hashem lekecha, ki chashalta ba'avinecha. We call it avinecha, that's in purpose of it. But we say chashalta means you stumbled, you messed up. Now, the Gemara asks, but Rish Lakish said better than that. He said that tshuva is so great that it makes zidonos, it makes purposeful averos into zechus, it makes it into mitzvos. The Gemara says again, this is from ava, that's where one does tshuva from love. But where somebody does tshuva just from fear, that makes it into accidental averos, and tishkogos does not make it into actual mitzvos. Now the Gemara goes further about the greatness of tshuva. Rav Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, "Gedol tshuva. Tshuva is great. Shemarech hashnos v'shel adam. It makes a person's life longer, like the Torah says, "B'shuv rasha mirishasa chayo yichya." Person does tshuva, he will live. Now further, Rav Yitzchak says they said in the Marava, named Rabbi Bar Mari, look how great a Kadosh Baruch Hu is, because the way that people are flesh and blood, and the way they act is when somebody angers somebody else. With something he says something inappropriate to him. So if he tries to get him to forgive him, sometimes he'll be forgiving and sometimes he won't be forgiving. And even if he will be forgiving, it could be that he'll be forgiving only with some kind of bribe or something. It will not just be, if you say I'm sorry, he's not necessarily going to forgive you just for that. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not like that. Even though somebody does an Aveira in secret, or specifically in secret, so there's no Chal Hashem involved, all you have to do is do tshuva with your words, like the Torah says, Kichli machem devarim v'shuva al Hashem. Do tshuva with your words and return to Hashem, and Hashem accepts your tshuva. Not only that, but He even considers it to be a mitzvah, like the Torah says in the same pasuk, v'kach toiv. Not only that, it's even viewed as if he brought karbonos, like the Torah says right afterwards, unishama that our lips, with the things that we say, the tshuva that we do with our words, count as karbonos. Now maybe you'll think it's only obligatory karbonos, parichova. So the Torah says further in the same pasuk, I'll heal you and it will become, I will love them, nedava, as a donated free carbon, not something you're obligated to give. Now based on that pasuk, the Gemara also says, or Rabbi Meir used to say, that tshuva is great because of one person's tshuva, you can bring forgiveness to the entire world. Like the Torah says, Erpam Meshuvasam, Ayavim Nedava, Kishav Apim Mimenu. I will heal their straying, I will love them for you. My anger is turned away from Mimenu, from him. So my anger for the entire world is just because of him. Just because of a single individual who did tshuva, it brings kapara for everybody. Okay, Gemara goes further. What is a true Baal Tshuva? So Gemara says that the way to define Baal Tshuva is somebody who violates a certain Avera, and the same Avera comes to him again. In this time he does not commit it, and Rav Yehuda adds to that, that's only if it's with the same woman, if the first Avera was with a woman, in the same time, that is a parallel time, and in the same place, meaning it's as full and as desirable as it was in the first place. It's a full repetition, and yet the only reason that he's not doing that Avera is because he did tshuva, because he changed his ways and reinvented himself. Now the Gemara discusses somebody who violates an Isser, who does an Avera. Should he keep it hidden or should he reveal it? So Gemara says this is a contradiction in Psukim. One pasuk says Ashrei Nesoi Pesha Kisui Chata. It's good to cover up your averos, and another one says Mechasib Shav Lo Yetzlech. Somebody covers up his averos will not be successful. So which one are you supposed to do? So Gemara says it depends. If it's already known, so then you should be public about it because you should show that you're doing tshuva. You should take off the Chal Hashem by making it clear that you're repenting for it. That's a mistake, and you admit it, and it was a mistake. If however people don't know about it, you should keep it to yourself to avoid publicizing it and creating more of a Chil Hashem. The Gemara gives another answer. One is talking about an Avera between people, between man and another man, and one is talking about an Avera between you and Hashem. It's between you and Hashem, keep it to yourself. There's no reason to involve other people in it. If there's other people involved, you do have to ask Mechila, so you should not cover it up and pretend it didn't happen. Now, Gemara says that somebody who did an Aveira, the first time he gets Mechila for it. He does Tshuva, he gets Mechila for it. The second time he gets Tshuva for it, he does Tshuva for it, he's forgiven. The third time is also forgiven. By the time he does it the fourth time, he's not forgiven anymore. Like the Torah says, Kayam Hashem al Shlosha Pishay Yisrael. For 3 Averas I'll forgive you. But the fourth time, I'm not going to look away so fast. Now, another pasuk that shows the same idea. Hein kol ela yifal kel pamayim shalosh im cover. I would do this for you 2 or 3 times, but the fourth time, I'm not going to. Now, the Gemara says, why do I need the second pasuk if I have the first one? The Gemara says you could get rid of the first one, you could push that one away, and say that's only talking about the entire community, because its language is for Klal Yisrael, says the sins of Israel. Right, Pishay Yisrael. But for a certain individual, maybe not. Maybe you don't get 2 or 3 times forgiven. That's why we have the second pasuk, which says specifically im gaver, for a single individual. Okay, now they want to discuss this vidui. Vidui is admitting and confessing to the aver that somebody has committed. So the Gemara brings a brisa. So the Gemara says that somebody who says Vidui on Yom Kippur does not have to say Vidui on the same Averis again the next Yom Kippur. But if he repeated them, he did that Aver again, then he does have to say Vidui again for what he did now and for what he did before. If he did not repeat the Avera, but he says Vidui again for something that he did before this past Yom Kippur, so the Torah says he's Kikelev Shavel Keo, like a dog that returns to his vomit. He's going back to his old mistakes. What's the point in that? So Rav Yaakov disagrees. He says, no, the more Vidui you do, even on old Averas from before last Yom Kippur, it's praiseworthy, like the Torah says, Keep Shayani Edev Chatasi Negdi Samin. I remember, I know my sins, and my Averas are always before me. So then what's Kekelev Shav El Keo? What does it mean when it says that the dog goes back to his vomit? What's that referring to? So Gemara says that's like a person who commits the same Avera again and again, like the Torah says. Like the Gemara quotes of Huna, famous Gemara, somebody who commits a sin and he does it again becomes mutter. It becomes mutter. Why should it become mutter? It doesn't become a mutter, but he considers it like a mutter. He gets used to it, and it's no longer a struggle for him to do that Aveira. He just gets in the habit of committing it without anything stopping him. Now, concerning Vidui, the Gemara says you have to spell out what the Avera is exactly. You have to say it. Like Moshe said about Hashem, like Moshe said about Klal Yisrael in reference to the Egel, Ana chata am bazeh chata gedayla. Please, Hashem, his people has committed a grave sin. Vayasu lahem Elohei zav. They made a god of gold. So you have to spell it out. That's what Yehuda ben Bava holds. Rabbi Kiva disagrees. Rabbi Kiva says, no, the Torah says, Ashri nesoy pasha kisoy chata, that the best thing to do is to cover up what the Avera is exactly. So Gemara says, then why did Moshe spell it out? The Gemara says, Moshe was trying to say that Hashem, it's your fault. It was part of his defense for Klal Yisrael. He said, Hashem, you gave them so much silver and so much gold. Until they had to stop you, they had to say stop. So of course they had so much. What were they supposed to do? It was natural for them to violate this Avera, and therefore it's your fault. It was a defense. Now, on the subject, Gemara compares 2 leaders of Klal Yisrael, Moshe and David HaMelech, how they dealt with their own Averas. So Moshe was very open about his Avera. What did he do? That he hit the rock at the Meriva. And it says many times throughout the Torah, Hashem said, you didn't listen to me. You could have been Mekadesh Shem Shemayim, and you did not do that. Every time it says that Moshe is going to die, it says that that's the reason. Now obviously Moshe wanted it written in there. Now, by David HaMelech does not say that. After his sin that he did with Bathsheba, it says, Al Yikosev Surchani. David said in the Tehillim, don't write what my Avera is, because Ashri Nesoy Pasha Kisur Chata, that's the pasuk we just brought. So the Gemara explains what's the difference between David and Moshe. The difference is, if you think about the following Moshe, we had 2 women who went to court to get Malchus. One of them was guilty of adultery, and the other one, what did she do already? She ate some unripe figs from Shemitah. The halacha is that Shemitah fruit has to be eaten only when it's ripe. She ate it when it's unripe. So she wanted that the court should announce what she did exactly. She wanted everybody to be aware of what she did, so they shouldn't think she did a terrible Avera like committing adultery like the other woman did. So that was Moshe, who wanted his Avera to be publicized, but David wanted it to be hidden. Now, the Gemara says on the topic of exposing Averis, the Gemara says if you have a hypocrite, somebody who acts like a tzaddik and is really a rasha inside, you should expose him. Like the Torah says, when a person and a tzaddik leaves his righteousness and starts doing Averis, I place a stumbling block before him. I want everybody to know. Otherwise, it'll create a tremendous chal Hashem when people see his avera or they see the punishment that befalls him. Says the Gemara, the tshuva of a absolutely wicked individual, a person who is sealed for wicked, but if he does tshuva, it still blocks the punishment that he's supposed to get. And even if the decree against him has been sealed, tshuva will still block it. Now the Gemara says, Shavas Hashem Seifei Takala. When the wicked people have peace, that ends up bringing trouble. Because when they have peace and calm, they hatch all kinds of evil.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.